Hello and welcome to the latest edition of T2RL Talks. I'm Bert Craven, Deputy CEO here at T2RL, and in a break from our normal programming, in place of the dulcet tones and smooth stylings of Ian Tunnicliffe, you've got me. The only consolation I can offer you is that I'm joined by Keith Martin, our VP of Airline Retail, and Sam Chamberlain, Chief Product Officer at FLYR. So hello to both of you guys.
Hey,
hello.
Nice to be here.
Yeah. So this week, Keith and I are going to be talking to Sam about FLYR's long and winding road to offer, order, settle, deliver. If we pick up on the first key word there, which is long. We've talked many times on this podcast about the fact that our journey to offer, order, settle, deliver is going to be a long one. It's going to be a potentially 3 to 5 year business transformation. And while that may sound daunting, that's not actually unusual sort of transition period for the airline industry, is it, Sam? I mean, you've been around the industry for many years, so I'm presuming that those kinds of timescales don't daunt you at all.
They don't, Bert, and it's absolutely normal, let's say, quote unquote. But what that also implies at the same time is that it's going to take airlines that amount of time or even longer to start to get value out of the transition to offer and order. And I think that means that there's probably another avenue to look at or explore to see whether something can be done on shorter timescales to bring value a little bit sooner, whilst understanding that transition to fully displace a PSS will take time.
How can we do that? Right? How can airlines really get that value from OOSD capabilities in a time frame which is not the long term years that it's going to take? They want to see quarterly change, right? And importantly, how can they ensure that these efforts aren't going to be thrown away in terms of in the coming years, in terms of the transition? How can we get those quick wins?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Keith. I think we have to change how we look at this a little bit. In the past, we've thought about going from one PSS to another, or these major commercial airline initiatives where you rip and replace a large piece of the technology ecosystem to go to something new or upgraded or better. And that still applies here, but instead of this entire rip and replace idea of let's go away from this big thing to this new big thing, we probably have to think about how these two worlds can coexist for a period of time. And that coexistence means new technology and solutions that make up the offer and order, a settle and deliver ecosystem live alongside the traditional PSS for a period of time, and therefore allowing airlines to start to capture incremental value opportunities from technology that lives with the PSS. And you can sort of think of that as, let's take a short step to get some value in a reasonable sort of time, and then in the future let's take another step, and let's take another step, with that final step, if you like, being the grand prize of I no longer need the traditional PSS because I've taken all of these incremental steps over time, and now I have everything needed in the offer, order, settle, deliver world. That means I probably don't need now what was there from the legacy world.
Yeah. And so this notion of incremental earned value and incremental transitions, and also the coexistence that you talk about, this sounds like the sort of fabled modularity of offer order solutions is pretty critical in achieving that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that vendors and airlines alike in this community have talked about the importance of modularity for a while now. I think everybody's bought into the idea that something that does not require this open heart surgery is better if you can collect pieces from your vendor of choice, or vendors of choice, I should say. The point of modularity being that the airline can pick and choose where they come from. And since we really don't, at FLYR at least, we don't have any of that sort of legacy concern around, well, how do we deal with our investments and management of a PSS alongside trying to develop new things for an airline. We can look at it a little bit sort of clean sheet and a little bit greenfield of, we only need to focus on making these modular pieces work, and then figuring out how that will work for the airline with what they've got.
Yeah, but I mean, there's making modular pieces work. There's making your own modular pieces work with each other, and then there's making your modular pieces work with other people's modules. What sort of approach are you taking to that? Because we're in a new world, and there's a need for new standards here. The advantage of a monolith, at least, was that there's kind of one big perimeter, and now it feels like we've got a lot of little jigsaw pieces that need defining.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. We certainly make it sound like it's minimized or simplified by saying modularity wins, and that's all we need to think about. The devil is in the detail, that's for sure. Now, IATA and the airline community themselves are trying to adhere to a certain degree of standards that will allow this to sort of happen as seamlessly as possible, but going through the process right now of building the offer and order ecosystem at FLYR, we're seeing that isn't enough, because it's either not defined adequately enough, or it's not robust enough, or it's not been thought through enough, because it's relatively easy to sit in front of some sort of design or mock-up software and say, well, I think an integration and an architecture should look like this, and that's what the standard should be. But when you actually come to build it, you realize there's lots of little things that were not quite thought about. And this requires, therefore, vendors and airlines to almost create new or evolve those standards. And we're actually seeing that happen now. And a good example of that is in the order accounting, which has a lot of complexity, going away from sort of revenue accounting to order accounting. And whilst there are kind of reference and frameworks and standards, it certainly isn't complete. So one path is that we, as a vendor leading the space, can help to frame new standards and push them out and into the community and start to consider these as kind of evolved or new standards. Or we can just try and make things as open source and simple as possible, so that we find the easiest way for one piece of software to connect with another. And whether that's through open APIs, using open source solutions, or what have you, we need to simplify it as much as possible. But I will be the last person to say that we don't need to worry about integrations and the integration complexity.
No,
I've been burnt enough times to know that it's painful and it's real. But there are ways that we can lead the charge together and create these evolving standards that mean we can make it work.
Yeah. And FLYR are one of the organizations who've been doing this for real with customers, i.e. building an actual hybrid architecture. So, when you talk about, all of these little things, this is not anticipatory. This is stuff that you're actually solving today in the real world, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And some of this was sort of known knowns that would pop up. Like we are going to implement our offer and order management system with a third party, for example, that would provide intelligence. And again, not because we're not provisioning that piece, but because we're open to allowing the airline to say, well, I want my optimization and intelligence to come from this vendor, and I want my core offer orchestration and order management and all those pieces around it to come from you. And so we went into it knowing that our first foray into this was going to have modularity. And therefore we thought, that's fine. We know that we have to plug in all of these different pieces. But again, you get into the detail and discover actually something's not defined. And there is a little bit of sort of hustle and tussle and back and forth on, well, I think it should be this way, and another vendor will think it should be that way. And having the airline in the middle is a good thing, because we can sort of look at it from a value and use case perspective and say, what are we actually trying to achieve and make happen for the airline? And what is the most replicable and scalable solution that we think is going to apply to the next airline and the next airline after that, and then come to a consensus. And so far, I'm happy to say that's working quite well. I don't think we've had sort of any extreme kind of scenarios where we say, hey, it's my way or the highway, or any other vendor has said that. And probably because we're all trying to make this work with the same end objective. So,
yeah. And So, and we talked about these kind of new modules, but one of the big challenges, and this is a thing I know from speaking to airlines that they're very focused on, is also having interfaces and backward compatibility with legacy standards. So the challenge there of defining a completely new set of standards and unlocking all kinds of new capabilities, while at the same time being able to talk back to the EDIFACT environments and so on. How have you found that? Because that sounds like it would be particularly challenging.
It is challenging, and we describe the way we do it as a bit of a, this software in the middle is a bit of a silver bullet or a magic piece of the ecosystem. And it's not really magic, of course, but it's something that sort of bridges old world and new world. Our piece of that software is called the legacy translator. You might hear it sort of called like a document bridge or a document exchange or a standards exchange or something like this. But we create those interfaces to deal with sort of the legacy EDIFACT standards, teletype messaging, or whatever collection needs to be there for GDS distribution or legacy GDS distribution, I should say, or interline code share connectivity and things like this, and then make sure that we can marry that perfectly with the order data model and the offer data model, so that information can be synchronized and flow backwards and forwards. And it really is a little bit magic in that it's the piece that makes it seamless and makes it work. Like no airline, even if they say, hey, I'm going to actually do a full transition away, I'm not going to do this in a modular way. I want to shed the PSS and I want to go to offer and order. Even if they do that, they're still going to have to deal with their interline code share partnerships. They still want to, unless they're going to forego all distribution methods, they're still going to have to live in the old world. They can't choose to live only in the new world. So that middle piece of translation software, the legacy translator, is absolutely crucial. And yes, there are parts of that puzzle that mean somewhere hidden deep in that box, a ticket is being created for the purposes of allowing that passenger to through check and travel on an interline journey and let settlement happen, etc. But that's the magic of sort of marrying old and new. But at the same time, not exposing that complexity. So you don't have to worry about how is an EDIFACT message being translated, how is teletype being translated, how is it appearing and manifesting itself as an order. The airline should never need to worry about that. They should just know that all of that seamlessness is happening in the background.
Interesting. Keith, I know in the work that you've been doing with a number of our customers, one of the key focuses has been on trying to find and identify and build out those scenarios and use cases for cost saving, for incremental revenue, and so on. Can you give any examples of that kind of thing for Sam to talk to in terms of where airlines are looking for that? We talked about it as early earned value or incremental value.
Yeah, well, airlines are starting this transformation, are looking at this very long transformation. It's going to be very complex. It's going to be very costly. We're going to be running parallel worlds together. And so building the business case for whatever type of transition they're looking at, whatever particular transition path they're looking at is extremely important. Each airline is different in terms of the aspects of their level of maturity on whether it be NDC, dynamic pricing, or different prep levels for moving towards OOSD. But the business case is key. I'd be very curious, Sam, what you think in terms of cost saving or revenue generating use cases, in terms of what can the airlines take advantage of before having completed a transition from the current PSS.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just explained a little bit about how important a legacy translator is and how all of this technology comes together and all of this, but it's there's no point going through these kind of transitions for technology's sake, right? It's nice to have a shiny box that does something new, but unless it's either reducing costs or driving value and revenue generation, or a combination of that, also making a better passenger experience, it's a little bit of a moot point. So we at FLYR at least have centered our go-to-market around this of like, how can you take an incremental use case from the offer and order settle deliver ecosystem on top of your PSS to either reduce costs or drive some value, because that is how you'll then build a business case. And it's not an isolated business case. It's like, I could take this, get some value, and then next take something else, and then next take something else. So you sort of build this incremental business case, this stepwise value up over time. And what I'm going to say next makes it sound very simple and a bit like candy aisle shopping or plug and play. But we, for example, would work with an airline to say, what is the most important thing for you to start to explore next? And for example, personalization, continuous pricing, personalized product creation and offer, experimentation in that space. Exactly. There's a lot of research, there's a lot of activity, there's been a lot of interest in this. That might be the first use case that the airline is interested in. And we would say, right, what are the components from this toolkit needed to enable that use case? And what is the value that we think we're going to get out of it? Luckily, on that kind of use case, there has been a lot of activity over the past years done on what kind of value you can expect from continuous price and dynamic product creation. But the next airline might say, you know what, I'm in an airline joint venture or a group, or I have partnerships, and the most important thing for me right now is to have sort of a consistent brand offering across this group, and to be able for the airlines to cross retail each other's products in a very, very seamless way. Right. So not just selling an entire itinerary, but being able to seamlessly sell the seat selection on the downward carrier and all of these types of things. And then the next airline might come along and say, my kind of value proposition and my brand is all about loyalty and selling and applying loyalty to third-party products and things beyond airfare. And so the good thing here is that underpinning this is a small collection of products, and most likely the notion of a new kind of digital shopping cart to allow all of this to happen. And then they can say, I'll take this one first. Here's the value. They might say, I want to move to an order model that's consistent and consolidated across all channels, because it makes seamless servicing a reality. Right. And that reduces cost and pain somewhere. And so the order of this is a little bit like pick and choose your own kind of journey for the airline. But we would work with the airline and say, like, well, this is what we think a logical and a good sequencing is for you, and this is the value or the cost savings you would get over time, and therefore here's the business case that we think looks good for you, here's the business case for us, and that should work. And if it doesn't work, there isn't a justification.
Yeah. And have you found that there is a secret to doing things in isolation, doing small things? Because in my experience, that's actually one of the really challenging things, is to say, I just want to change one thing in one channel for one set of customers, and it's like trying to move one Christmas tree light. The whole thing seems to want to move with you. And you say, well, if you change this, then you've got to change this thing in this channel and this thing over here. And by the time you've finished tracing it all the way through the system, your one tiny thing is a huge piece of work. So have you found some good tips and tricks for creating those isolated experiments, if you like?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good analogy, and it's absolutely true that this world is so complex and convoluted that you can't touch something without it having ripple effects up and down the chain. Now, going back to that, we ourselves haven't got to worry about our own kind of PSS kind of implication. We've built those kind of modular solutions to be able to tackle individual small cases and small opportunities with as minimal disruption as possible, but knowing that all has to tie back to a PNR or the PSS itself. And so we put a lot of thought and energy around how do we make a seamless synchronization with a PNR, with the DCS, with order accounting or revenue accounting, and any other inputs and outputs that are needed, so that when something does change, it is represented and reflected as perfectly and as seamlessly as possible in the source of truth, which, while you have a PSS in place, is still going to be the PNR. So we can say, hey, we're going to implement a new advanced and flexible shopping cart for you that allows you to sell non-homogeneous orders, right? You can go and book a flight from, London to New York, and you're going to meet your friend there that's coming from Madrid, and it's all in the same order. But that has to obviously not break anything anywhere. And that's probably actually a big example, not a small example. But that integration and that synchronization with the PSS has to take care of all of that logic and process to say, well, actually, that's two PNRs. Right, I can't force the PSS to handle this situation. But I'll go and create two PNRs. I'll marry them together. I'll represent them in a single order. If they're serviced, we'll go and service them independently and marry them again. Things like this. So the more use cases we think of, the more we go and trace end to end what the implication of that is, right from product creation and ideation of what the airline wants to sell, right through for servicing post-delivery and settlement, and which part of the ecosystem does this touch, and how can we simplify and minimize kind of ripple effects here. So and I will go on record and say there will be some use cases where you just might not be able to. It's too complex, or there's too many things, or you can't necessarily solve that tricky challenge of I'm going to break something here. So it might be like, hey, we have to think about how two pieces of the puzzle have to get solved with modularity here. We can give you this use case, but you need this engine that dynamically predicts bundles of products, but you also need a change in your digital experience to handle it as well. And so we think of the whole thing, whether we provision the whole thing or whether it's, again, provision through partnerships and other vendors, we will at least tell the airline, this is everything you need to think about.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's a key thing when you talk about the digital experience, because in almost every case, the last bit of technology before you get to the eyeballs of the customer is a separate piece of digital technology from the offer order management system. And simply changing the way the OOMS works doesn't necessarily change anything in the digital experience. So how have airlines been approaching that whole UX thing of educating a customer that, oh, by the way, you can now add two completely different itineraries to the same booking? Is that going to result, you think, in very different booking flows for customers?
Yeah, it's something that we're sort of exploring in a lot of detail with sort of design and user experience partners right now. What does a future state shopping experience look like for airlines that are selling something completely differently in a different way that they sold in the past? And there's two parts to this. There's, well, what does that experience look like? And sounds like a whole new digital experience. And then there's what if the airline wants to get this capability but not indulge in a complete replacement of the digital experience right now? And there are little tricks and ways that you can add side-loaded digital experiences, sort of how we refer to it, that allows this sort of come out of your current kind of IBE or digital experience loop temporarily to solve this problem, come back into it to complete transactions, and that can be made completely seamless as well. You wouldn't know that the passenger wouldn't know that they were in a different experience, except they've now got something else that they can do to their advantage or their benefit. It's branded seamlessly for the airline. If the airline wants to go and as part of their transformation is looking for digital experience replacement, that's fine. That's just another piece of the puzzle. What we don't want to do is say, you can get all of these benefits from those example use cases I just gave, and we can install all of that and take care of logic and plumbing, but you're on your own now. You have to go and figure out your digital experience, which means that's another project that might take another year, and time to value has just gone out of the window. The whole idea of proposing and dealing with modularity is that we're reducing that time frame and making you get, or allowing you to get value in a much shorter time scale. So with it comes the proposal of, hey, you don't need to do this complete rip and replace here of the front end. Here's how you can kind of like complement it or supplement it in a seamless way. And if you want to go and replace it in the future, you can.
Yeah. And have you is there now sort of a decoupling then between the notion of the order and the cart, in the sense that I could go and have a shopping experience on an airline's website, and in my cart I might have an extra bag that I've added to one trip, and I might have booked another trip, and all of those things are sitting in one cart, but when I click checkout and pay, all of that is going to be nicely and neatly arranged into the correct order structures for me. Is that where we're headed?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing really stopping that kind of flexibility from happening. And I think consumers ultimately, and they might not even realize it today because everyone's conditioned to buy airfare and travel products the same way, and it's not really evolved too much.
Yes.
But when they're shopping on Amazon and something else and Walmart or wherever, they know exactly how a digital shopping cart works with, save my cart and come back later and finish on my iPad instead of my desktop and all of this. And so that degree of flexibility will come to the travel ecosystem as well, and to the airline world. Now, whether that is reconciling multiple orders or not is not really is no longer a technology question. It's really like, what does the airline want to allow, and what kind of experience do they want to give their guests? And there's nothing in the architecture and the design of the technology components that will prohibit that kind of thing happening. And in fact, we've said this before, a product is a product. Like you offer an order should allow you to sell whatever it is you want to sell, however you want to sell it, through whatever channel, through whatever means, and give whatever kind of flexibility. And that means architecting a system that is not constrained to a flight, or is not constrained to, well, you have to have all of these pieces bought and sold together. Like, if a lot of inspiration and a lot of kind of benchmarking and framework reference comes from kind of the non-airline world of digital retailing, of what is happening elsewhere that has proven to work and be good, and is only not applying to travel because of legacy technology constraints.
Yeah, I mean, and you used an interesting phrase there, which is breaking the conditioning of users who've come to expect airline and travel products to be sold in a very specific way. And Keith, obviously, you've had years of experience in retail outside of airline as well as within airline. Is this kind of suddenly a light bulb's going on for you, going, this is what I've been talking about all these years? And does it feel like this is the right kind of progress?
Yeah, absolutely. Online retail, e-commerce is still very far ahead of the capabilities that the airlines are currently using. And so we're all using it every day, right? We're using Uber, we're using Amazon, as Sam just mentioned. We're using a lot of products which are very complicated, but really boiled down into very simple processes for customer facing. And so there's an expectation now from the airlines, who are willing to make the investment, willing to take the risk on making the transformation happen, to transform and to really bring that new level of customer experience and bring that new level of expectations that the customer has, to their customers. And so we have the proof in the wider retailing world. It's been working very well for a long time. We're still waiting now to see the first levels of proof coming from the airline IT vendors.
Yeah, you said proof there, and I think this translates broadly, but the proof is in the pudding is never more kind of applicable or accurate than in this kind of scenario.
And I think that's what everyone wants to know, Sam, is when are we going to see it? When can we see some of this, right?
Exactly. Like it's good to talk about it. It's good to say that we have this idea, we have that idea, but what matters is proving that it's possible. And there's no better proof than sort of launching a new airline that has absolutely no dependency on this legacy PSS environment at all. And we've spent the last 18 plus months going from a base of some solutions and some technology to in production ready software that can handle this end to end. And just a week or so ago, I think it was on the 2nd of August, we completed and demonstrated in a production-like environment the first kind of truly digital native offer and order transaction end to end from a mobile device that allowed somebody to shop for with that kind of notion of a flexible shopping cart, add their products, go through and pay for them, and then come back and service them. So it's there, it's ready. We've got that timestamp of that first transaction, which meant everything came together, all the components, the optimized pricing, the offer orchestration, the selection of products from the catalog, the decrementing of inventory from the stockkeeper, the order creation and the order management, the distribution of order-related messaging. All of these things have now happened seamlessly. And, we're going to launch this in production for the whole world to see later this year. And actually, in a month or so, just over from now, we'll be together again, Bert, to engage talking about this, and be really excited to talk about how we made it happen. We've spent a bit of time here talking about what the industry needs and what should happen. I'll be really excited to sort of explain a little bit about how we did it and what the last 18 months has really looked like and where we've got to.
Yeah. So. Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to it. And I mean, also, I'm hoping that by then some of us will have been able to go and experience that live booking, and also get to talk to the folks from the carrier about, the whole ecosystem that's been built. I think, no pressure, but the world is watching here. And I think we're with bated breath. So really, really looking forward to the conference. This is a great segue for me to talk a little bit about T2RL Engage 2025, which is coming up 22nd to the 24th of September in London. Fantastic venue next to St. Paul's Cathedral. We have a huge contingent of vendors and airlines attending, are registered for that event now. Obviously, as Sam has said, FLYR will be there to talk a little bit more about the journey that they've been on with a real customer doing real bookings. So this is this is starting to feel like a turning point. It's starting to feel like traction. So I will say with that, thank you very much for Sam to coming along and talking to us today a bit about what FLYR have been up to on their long and winding road. Thank you for Keith for that extra perspective there. It's been really great talking to you both. And thank you again. See you in September.